I want you to picture a meeting that you've probably been in. A real issue's on the table. Everyone in the room knows it's real. People have talked about it in the hallway, maybe over coffee, inside conversations, after other meetings. But in the room, no one brings it up directly. The answers stay careful. The discussion stays on the surface. And when the leader says, "Anything else?" the room goes quiet. A few people might nod, and the leader reads the silence as alignment or agreement. And then the meeting ends. And then 10 minutes later, the real conversation starts in the hallway. If that sounds familiar, this episode is going to explain what was happening in that room, because the silence was not agreement. It was data. And most senior leaders have been misreading it for years. Psychological safety gets talked about a lot in healthcare right now, and most of the time it gets framed as a culture value, something built through warmth, approachability, support, or good team building. And of course, none of that stuff is wrong, but it's incomplete. Because psychological safety is not just a value, it is the condition that determines whether real information reaches the people making the decisions. And that's what makes it so important. When safety is high, people bring the real picture. They bring in the true concerns, the actual risks, the true gap between what the strategy says and what's really happening on the ground. And when safety is low, people bring in a distorted version of that picture. So they just say what feels safe, and they soften or distort what feels risky. And they leave out the part that could create tension. And senior leaders then are always making decisions, of course, based on what reaches them. And if what reaches them is accurate, then those decisions have a chance to be solid. But if what reaches them is filtered, then those decisions are being built on incomplete information. They might still be thoughtful and good decisions, but they're being made on a partial picture. And that's why psychological safety matters so much. It determines whether the top of the system is working with reality or with the safer version of reality. So where does psychological safety come from? Why does it feel strong in some organizations and weak in others, even when they all talk about openness? The answer sits higher up in the cascade. Psychological safety is the third layer in the Leadership Performance Cascade, and it's shaped by the two layers above it: identity and regulation. The identity layer shapes what a leader does when pressure hits. Do they stay curious? Do they shut things down? Do they protect the person bringing difficult news? Or does that person end up wishing they had stayed quiet? The regulation layer shapes whether a leader is settled and open enough to receive real information. A regulated leader can hear something difficult without making the whole room more tense. An unregulated leader, even with good intentions, often signals through tone, speed, expression, or reaction that this may not be a safe moment to speak honestly. And the team reads that immediately. Not in a formal way, it is automatic all the time. They are constantly reading the room and asking, is it safe to say truth or the real thing here? And that's why psychological safety cannot be created by policy alone. It is produced upstream. It is created by what leaders do when someone actually speaks. Let's now talk about the open door policy, because almost every senior leader has either said this or heard it: my door is always open. And most leaders really do mean it. They genuinely want people to bring things forward. But in many organizations, the real issues do not surface until they have become much bigger problems. So why does that happen? Because psychological safety is not created by the invitation. It is created by what happens when someone accepts it. If a manager has brought a difficult issue forward before and watched it get minimized, redirected, or quietly used against them later, then the open door stops having a positive meaning. The invitation might be real, but the safety is not, and the team has already learned that. If someone raises a concern in a meeting and the room shifts against them, everyone else learns from that moment too. It's not from a policy, it's from the response. It's the signal people trust. It's not what the leader says, it's what the leader does when someone speaks, and those are not the same thing. Psychological safety is built one response at a time. Every time a leader receives difficult information in a good or positive way, the room starts to feel a little safer. And every time they do not, it becomes more and more and less safe. An open door is just a door, but what matters is what happens inside of it. So let's go back to that meeting. The room went quiet. What was that silence actually saying? It was not saying that people had no opinion, because they did. It was not saying that they did not care, because most of them really do care. It was saying something much more specific. Speaking honestly does not feel worth the risk right now. And that is what silence often means. It's structural data. It tells you that the layers above have created a climate where honesty feels more costly than just being careful or cautious. And when that silence gets interpreted as agreement, then two things happen. First, the leader makes decisions based on a picture that lacks important information. They believe they have alignment, but what they may actually have is compliance. And those two things look very similar in a meeting, but they produce very different results afterwards. Secondly, the team watches the leader draw the wrong conclusion, and they learn something from that too. They learn that either the leader cannot see what's happening or maybe doesn't want to. And either way, the gap between the official conversation and the real conversation gets wider. And over time, the organization starts operating with two systems. We have the formal system, which is your meetings, your reports, your updates, and your verbalized positions. And then the informal system, which becomes hallway conversations, side messages, parking lot truths, and the places where the real picture still lives. And if the leader at the top is only hearing the formal system, then they are leading with incomplete information and intelligence. Incomplete. So in the next episode, I'm going to go into the communication layer. What happens to information as it moves upward? And why the picture that reaches the executive table is often not the full picture, and what that gap is costing the organization. If this episode brought something into focus for you, then the executive leadership briefing below gives you a simple map of the full cascade. And if you want to keep going, I will see you on the next episode.